I want you to get your Bibles out and turn to 1 Corinthians and Luke. 1 Corinthians and Luke. New building. We're headed for a new building. We're headed for a new location. Process is still ongoing. These kinds of commercial purchases aren't quick, and we're moving forward, each small detail at a time. I do want to report that last week, I told you from now on, as we're trying to work as much as we can towards that $130,000 down. Last week, one individual gave $2,000 towards that $130,000 in last week's offering right here at City Church. So yeah, so we're $2,000 closer, and that's very, very cool. It's been a great week. In moving forward in the details. To be quite honest with you, Tracy and I have been renting a house since we moved down here a little over a year ago, and we're trying to buy a house in El Mirage. We're going to influence that city. We're going to make a difference in that city. But what comes with that is some spiritual warfare, because when you buy a house, you're not just buying a piece of dirt. You're staking a claim, and if you walk with Christ, you're saying this piece of land is going to produce righteous fruit, and so we're going into a city that's kind of been under the radar spiritually. At best, it's been under the radar spiritually. Maybe it's been digressing. And we're planting a church in a building that hasn't been making any difference. That's not a negative on the people who meet there, but it's been about 30 people from start to finish, talking to the people that are around the church building. There's not a lot happening from that church making a difference in the city. So we're going in laying a claim. We're going to make a difference in the city. We're going in trying to buy a house in the city. And all of a sudden we stirred things up. It's like we put a broom handle in a hornet's nest and spun it around. And so now we're just running, trying to get away from the bees. And they keep trying to catch up with us. So we put on Ross's boots. And we're out. So we're moving forward. I want to talk about that today. Talk about what it's going to take, and I'm going to warn you now. I'm tempted. We have a lot of people on vacation this weekend, and I'm tempted to preach this message twice. I said last week that one of the problems we have in the church, and it's the only institute we have this problem on, is there's this thought process that we don't review or repeat. We only do that in the church. We do it in school. It's okay to review and repeat in school, and it's okay to do it on the job. In fact, some jobs, that's repetition every day. You're going to do the same thing over and over and over. But in the church, it's like, no, we need something fresh, something new, keep us entertained. We need it all every week. And as I was preparing, thinking how crucial today's message is, I was thinking I need to preach this more than once. And then I was reminded of a pastor. His name is Frank DiMaggio. He pastored Portland City Bible Church. And Pastor DiMaggio, a couple of his claims to fame. One, he was going to do a 6-week series on prayer back in the late 90s. He was going to do a 6-week series on prayer, and he ended up preaching on prayer 52 weeks. So for a full year, he preached on prayer. But before that, listened to him speak in a conference. He said that he was speaking a message on God's grace, and he felt like God told him to preach the message back to back. So he preached it, and then he preached it the next week, and then he felt like God told him to preach it back to back to back, and he preached it again. He preached the identical message 6 weeks in a row, and after the 6th week, one of his elders came up to him and said, Pastor, that's a great word. I feel like I've heard it before. And it was the first time it stuck after 6 times. So I thought, well, if Frank DiMaggio can preach on grace and it takes 6 times for his elders to get it, I might preach this twice and then send you the video. And that'll be 3 times trying to catch up. But we're kind of on a theme verse of 1 Corinthians 16:9, which says, "For a wide and effective door has been opened to me," and that's this opportunity to go into El Mirage. A wide and effective door is open to me. And remember, it's a great door. It's a measurable door. It makes a difference. It's effective. It influences those around us. It influences our life. We're going through a great and effective door and changing a city and influencing the spirit realm. And there's many adversaries. There's going to be battles to get there. There's going to be battles to get through. And the larger the adversary, the greater the confirmation that that's a great door. The larger the adversary, the greater the battle, the stronger the confirmation that that's a great door. And so there's some steps we have to take in order to be successful and victorious as we walk through that door and come against these adversaries. So if you have your Bibles, I want you to open to Luke. Did I say Luke already? Luke chapter 8. We're going to look at one story that I'm just going to read through. And I'm going to have you help me preach today because I'm going to rather than kind of pick through as we go, I'm going to read a whole story, and then we're going to see what Jesus wants to tell us. And so as I read through this, I'm going to have you repeat some words after me, not because I want to insult your intelligence or call you third graders, but because there's some words I want to refer to after we read through this. So Luke chapter 8, verse 40 is the story I want to read through. And it says, now when Jesus returned, the crowd, say the crowd. There was a crowd. The crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. Say, waiting for him. Waiting for him. We're going to come back to these. And there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue. Say, ruler of the synagogue. Ruler of the synagogue. Okay. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house. Say, house. All right, we're getting this. For he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age. Say 12. 12. Now, most theologians believe that she was his only child, not just an only daughter. They believe that she was his only child. And she was dying as Jesus went. Say that. As Jesus went. Okay. The people pressed around him, and there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years. Say 12. 12. And though she spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. Now, my plan is if I don't repeat this message, I'm going to talk about this lady next week because there's so much in here. I'm not going to land on a lot of it today. Immediately her blood ceased. And verse 45, and Jesus said, who was it that touched me? When all denied it, when I read that, which just cracks me up, we just read that there was a crowd and they're pressing in, and they're all pressing in, they're pressing in. Jesus said, who touched me? And they're like, not me. Don't know. Peter said, Master, the crowd's surrounding you, and they're pressing in on you. Jesus said, someone touched me, for I perceive the power has gone out from me. And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him. Declared in the presence, watch this, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him. Now I'm going to talk about her a little bit right now, and then we're going to feed this. I want you, because we need to understand what just happened here. She declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she has been immediately healed. Now we have to think about culturally what's going on here. She'd been bleeding for 12 years nonstop. In another church that says, boy, God really showed up today, and no lives are changed. We weren't challenged to live differently. I don't look different tomorrow. I can play the game here, but hey, cowboy, how do you play the game tomorrow? You okay? The word Jairus, by the way, means whom God enlightened. But we read twice, he's the leader of the synagogue. He's the leader of the synagogue. The synagogue was a sect of people that were already had decided Jesus wasn't the Messiah. He was a good teacher, but he wasn't the Messiah. See, the system will say there's an appropriate way to be a Christian. But when the need in my home says, I need revival, I need something big, I need to be the guy that's willing to bring Jesus to my home. I need to be the guy that says, no, I'm not going to live in the system any longer. There has to be a time for that. There has to be a place where we come to that reality, where we'll do whatever it takes. Listen, I want to read you. William Barclay wrote a commentary, and I want to read you what he wrote in the commentary about Jairus. Listen to what he said. Jairus was the president of the synagogue. That is to say, he was the man who was responsible for the administration of the synagogue and ordering of public worship. He had reached the highest post that life could give him. Did you hear that? He had reached the highest post that life could give him in the respect of his fellow men. No doubt he was well-to-do. No doubt he had climbed the ladder of earthly ambition. No doubt he had achieved a place of prestige. That's who this guy was. But when his daughter started dying, the system and the accolades and the comfort were no longer his decision system. He reached the highest post that life could give him. He went from running the system to running from the system. See, we got to set a goal, City Church. I'm talking to you today. We have to set a goal where Jesus is so real that the rest of the city is so hungry for him that it doesn't matter where we meet. It doesn't matter what time we meet. It doesn't matter how often we meet. It's got to be a place where Jesus is so real that the city's so hungry for him. Listen. There's a story in the Bible 4 times, if you read it well, where Jesus was there and the people were so hungry for Jesus, they forgot to bring food for their kids. They just wanted Jesus. And what mother forgets to bring food for their kids? We would put that mother away. We'd be calling Child Protective Services. Hey, she hasn't fed a kid in 3 days. They're wandering around this dude named teacher. But they were so hungry for him, they forgot to bring food for their family. Yet what's cool about that was in that hunger, they got to see the miracle of multiplication. But we would rather live in the standard of practicality. We'd rather live in the system rather than live in a place of hunger. You with me? I know it's a challenging word today, but the deal is, I was talking to my son-in-law last night. This past week, there's been more conversation from you through verbal and through meetings and through emails, and there's more conversation right now about a spiritual stirring, a spiritual hunger, about wanting more, about thirsting for the Lord. There's so much going on in this group of people that as your pastor, I have a responsibility. I have a huge responsibility to lead you through that and protect you and pray for you and intercede for you and not let you get beat up in your spiritual vulnerability as you begin to ask new questions. But part of my responsibility is also to point you how to stay hungry and what to do with that hunger and how to grow in that hunger and not let that hunger fade. I'm telling you right now, I'm in a place in my life where I am, and I've been here a few times, but I'm in a place in my life where I want to be like Jairus, where the generations that I influence is more important than the opinion of my colleague. Where the generations that I influence are more important than the opinion of my colleagues. So, what are you currently giving yourself to? What are you currently giving yourself to that changes your sons and daughters? Are you giving yourself to a visa payment? You're giving yourself to the job? See, here's our culture. You can work 50 hours a week and be called diligent. But you spend 2 hours a day in prayer and you're a lunatic. You can spend 60 hours a week trying to pay for your children to go to college. You can spend 60 hours a week go in debt and pay for your children to go to college, but yet sell everything you own and buy a field that has a treasure buried in it, and you're part of a cult. Think about Jairus for a minute. Let's think about this. Leader of the synagogue, president of the synagogue, highest pinnacle that he could achieve in life. We already read that. He was at the highest place. What did this cost him? He had to go against those that had already decided they were going to kill Jesus. In fact, they wanted to kill Lazarus at this point, the guy that Jesus raised from the dead. He had to go against that crowd that he was the president of. What did this cost him? He had to have the thought, what will my peers think if I walk away from this? What about the people in the synagogue that he genuinely loved? What about the people he raised up? What about his children that were his son that was to become the next president? What about the good parts of the system that were working? They had a nice meeting hall. People were tithing. What about he was leading a system that God designed? Let's think about what he was giving up. This isn't like walking away from a heroin addiction. I mean, anyone would credit that. Yeah, I can see why the guy's getting really involved with the church and investing in the community. And I can see why, because a few days ago, the dude was addicted to heroin. That anyone can have that conversation. This cost him everything. Prestige, position, influence. Sometimes as parents, we need to ask, what is it we want our children to inherit? How many people do we know? Let me ask you this. I wrote this in my notes. How many people do we know that are done with church because it just left them empty? I can say what I'm about to say, and I know it can raise some stuff, but I'll say it anyway because I'm good at raising stuff. But I went to a Catholic high school. I did 4 years of Catholicism. I don't know how many of those people that I'm still in a relationship with are like, nah, the church, nah, left me empty. Why? Forget that they were Catholic. How many people we know that aren't Catholic who left the church because it left them empty? Because there's not a true hunger. Because there's not a presence. There's no proximity. We're not close to Him. We can get butts and chairs and money in the buckets and say, man, God's really moving. Is He? Is there any addicted people being set free? Are there any marriages being healed? Are there any dead people being raised? Is there any physical healings happening on? Really? You're defining God moving because butts are in chairs and money's in the buckets? That's your definition of God moving? Listen, if we're going to move to El Mirage just so that we can fill up a building and have members, I'm not interested in that. If we're willing to move to El Mirage and fill up a building so we can have sons and daughters and change a generation, I'm interested in that. The only reason we're going to have sons and daughters and change a generation is because we make the Father obvious, not the system. Does that make sense? And I'm no different than you. It's a battle. I mean, I know of 6 families that aren't here today, and part of me is like, what are you doing? Why are you not hungry? And part of me is like, because I'm not presented enough position to be hungry. Those of you that are here, you don't have an excuse after today. They came to him and said, too late, your daughter's dead. The system will say to you, you might have Jesus, but that's not enough. That's not enough. Listen, we know. No. And when in those days, when you were unclean, first off, she's a woman, so she wasn't welcome in a lot of places in the city. Secondly, she was unclean. Third, she was bleeding. Anyone that was bleeding, you couldn't touch. And she was unclean, you can't touch. And she's a woman. What are you doing here? And so when you came into a gathering of people, you were required, if you had leprosy or some other disease, you were required to either be ringing a bell or to declare, unclean, unclean, unclean. You had to declare that so that people could part and not touch you, because there was a law that you couldn't touch a woman that was bleeding. And she, for 12 years, nonstop bleeding, had spent everything she had on physicians. And that's not just doctors. That word physicians is even on what we might call witch doctors. And so she, this woman, crawls through the crowd, 12 years anemic, so we know she's not strong, crawls through the crowd, touches the hem of Jesus' robe. He says, power runs out of me. She stands up and she declared in the presence of all the people, I was unclean. I'm the woman that's been bleeding for 12 years. I'm the one that has felt abused. I'm the one that felt rejected. I'm the one that no one has ever wanted to touch. For 12 years, I've not been physically touched. For 12 years, I've not been embraced. For 12 years, I've been rejected. For 12 years, I've been hiding. For 12 years, I've been bleeding. And she declares it immediately. And I love this, verse 48. And he said to her, daughter, if all the crowd, only one person, got called family. This woman who said, you know what, I'm going to stand. This guy has healed me completely. And I am no longer who I was. I'm no longer a woman in the crowd. I'm a daughter. And for us to press through the crowd, I'm going down the trail on her tomorrow or next week, I think. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. While he was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house, so that's the second time we've been told he's a ruler in the synagogue, second time. Someone from the ruler's house came and said, your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore. But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, do not fear, only believe, and she will be well. And when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him, except Peter, John, and James, and the father and mother of the child. And all who were weeping and mourning for her, but he said, do not weep, for she is not sleeping. She is not dead, she's sleeping. Verse 53. And they laughed at him. Said they laughed at him. Okay, you guys forgot. They laughed at him. Come on. Knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, child, arise. And the spirit returned, and she got up at once, and he directed that something should be given to her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened. Which really is quite contrary to today's culture, isn't it? We had a miracle child get raised from the dead, we would be calling ESPN, CBS, Fox 10, fair, accurate, to the point. It's interesting that Jesus was trying to keep from being seen. Now, as I want to make a statement today, so I don't have to keep repeating myself. As we're going through today, we said house, we said home. So when I'm referring to house or home, as I unpack what we just read, there's a dual message there. I'm talking about our house, our home that we live in, and I'm talking about our house, our home, El Mirage. Dual meaning, okay? So I don't have to keep saying both. And also today, as I talk about when I say father, it's mother. It's dual meaning. When I say son, daughter. Okay, we all fall in that. And if you men can't handle being called a daughter, then you're probably not the bride of Christ. So that makes it pretty easy. Okay, we got that. So there's dual application. It's not just single in dimension. So that's Luke 8. Luke 9, we won't turn there, but in Luke 9, there's another story of a father who comes to Jesus, and there's a crowd. There's a crowd of people. Jesus comes down off the Mount of Transfiguration with Pete, Jim, and John, and he's hanging out with Pete, Jim, and John. They come off the mountain. Pete, Jim, and John are like, that guy glowed. And there's a crowd of people. The crowd of people, this father steps out and says, hey, I got a problem with my son. He's got epilepsy. He gets thrown in the fire. He gets thrown in the water. Don't know what to do. We know that when we read the story that it was a demonic possession. Jesus rebukes the spirit, sets the kid free. Okay? That's in Luke 9. So we have two stories, Luke 8 and 9. And what I find is interesting is in Luke 9, it takes, listen, the disciples couldn't cast that demon out. And they ask a question. They say, how come that didn't work? Because at this point in their life, every time they prayed, something happened. Every time they prayed, the miracle happened. And now they're saying to Jesus, hey, what's the deal here? Like, that one didn't work. What's going on? And Jesus says, well, that kind comes out with prayer and fasting. But Jesus didn't pray and fast when he cast it out. So what's the deal? Jesus wasn't saying if you would have prayed and fasted for that, you'd have won. Jesus was saying it takes a lifestyle of commitment to intimacy. There has to be a lifestyle of prayer and fasting in order to have that kind of authority. There has to be a lifestyle of intimacy in order to have that kind of authority. But the Father had a lifestyle of intimacy because the Father went to Jesus and went to Jesus and said, listen, the intercession of a father broke the pattern of the son. I want you to hear what I just said. The intercession of the Father broke the pattern of the Son. So we have two pictures here. We have two pictures here of two crowds, but yet in two crowds there's only one man that gets recognized in either story. And it's a one man that positions himself, that says, my home needs an encounter with Jesus. So that's called generational intercession. Only one person in either crowd. Remember, we said there was a crowd, and I had to say this. They were waiting for him. See, these two guys said, I'm no longer just going to wait for him. I'm going to go get him. They said, I'm no longer going to be a person in the crowd. I am going to go. I'm going to go get Jesus and bring him. See, we don't do that. I wonder how often we come to church to be fed rather than come to church to be a part of a revival. come to church to be joined. See that word joined? Jointed means there's any joint that's in your body, there's blood flowing both ways. I come because I'm jointed. There's flow. I invest and I receive. There has to be joint flow. I don't just come for my selfish gain. Are you with me? Okay. So because what I'm really saying is, one of the components to revival, one of the components to changing our homes, one of the components to changing our city is proximity. Putting ourselves in place to not just be one of the crowd pressing in, putting ourselves in a place where we're recognized we're the one that stood out. We're the one that wants to see something happen. And so often in church we can get caught up in having great programs. We got to have great programs. We got to have great worship. And we have a great children's ministry, by the way. We got to have great children. We got to have great youth. We got to have great Habitat for Humanity. We got to have a great men's ministry. And we get so caught up in we got to have great programs that we don't have a great encounter. We have to have a great encounter. We have to be in proximity with our King. And I think, unfortunately, we've grown so accustomed to not having it that it seems normal. Church without a powerful encounter, church without something that makes me react, is normal. Which is contrary to, if we really walking in the power of Christ, why is there not a reaction? If we were to put our finger in a light socket and you felt power, you would react. But yet we can come to church where we talk about the greatest power, the power that lives in you, raises people from the dead, the power to have authority over the demonic. We say we were in the power of God, and there's no reaction. We're still just part of the crowd. We're satisfied with just waiting for Him. But when we have a child in need, we're no longer going to be part of the crowd. I shared with you guys about Brad Hickson, the pastor of Aspire Churches, and he took his daughter to the doctor, and the doctor ran tests, and basically, for lack of just saving time, the doctor basically said, yeah, there's not a lot wrong. And when Brad was telling me the story, the doctor said to him, well, there's not a lot wrong. Brad said to me, he goes, listen, I'm a reformed a-hole, but I'm still not a very nice one. And I told that doctor, no, there's something wrong with my daughter, and I'm not leaving here until we find it, or I'm taking her to a place that can't find it. See, when there's an urgency in your home, the desire to be part of the crowd, when there's an urgency in our heart to change a city, when that becomes reality, when we really want to change a city, we can't just be another church pressing in. We can't be that. We can't just be another church playing the game. Open up to Luke 8 again. Let me show you what happens here. Now, let me preface it with this. If you hear me speak very often, sometimes I really, really struggle with chapter breaks because it interrupts the thought. So we're going to finish chapter 8 and read the first couple verses of chapter 9 in Luke. I don't want to interrupt the thought, okay? So watch here. Like 8:54, verse 54. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, Child, arise, and her spirit returned, and she got up at once, and he directed that something should be given her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them not to tell anyone what had happened. And he called the 12 together and gave them power. That's one thought. Forget the chapter 9 break. He healed the little girl. He told the parents not to tell anyone. And he called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. That's all one thought. So, okay, little Bible teaching. This is the third time we see 12. The little girl was 12. The woman with the issue of blood was 12 years. And we see 12 disciples. 12 in biblical numbers is the number of perfect government. It's all through. There was 12 tribes. There was 12 disciples. And the Revelation, the 12 12 is all through. So when we see 12 3 times in a row, we need to pay attention. So this isn't just a story about a couple of females that got healed. This is a picture of the perfect government of God. The perfect government of God. 12 times he tells us there's a number 12. Yeah, the girl's 12 years old. What's the picture there? She wasn't old enough to bear fruit. Woman with issue of blood, 12 years, she couldn't bear fruit. He took his 12 disciples and said, "You're going to bear fruit." He answered that need through his perfect government. Okay? And he said, "So I'm going to send you out, and now you're going to go do what I do." Listen, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about your situation right now. Whatever situation you're in. I had you say these words. As he went. The man came out of the crowd and said to Jesus, "My daughter is dying." And as Jesus went to the man's house, let me promise you something. If there was no hope, Jesus would have never started going there. And if there's a situation in your life where you feel like there's no hope, you're wrong, because Jesus is going there. But here's what I don't want to be a part of. The crowd that was there for the little girl, they were being paid to weep. That crowd, they were weeping over the little girl dying, were sent out of the room, and only those that had an intimate relationship with Jesus got to see the miracle. The mother, the father, Pete, Jim, and John. They were the only ones that got to see the miracle. The rest of them had to be just outside the door and then hear the story. Remember, they're the ones that laughed at Jesus. If what God has called you to do isn't laughable, probably not his call. Okay? Probably not his call. But that's just some personal application. We have two stories. I'm gonna wrap up on this. We have two stories where someone said, "I'm done being part of the crowd. I'm done playing the game, pressing in, but not making any difference." And when Jesus says, "Do you want more?" they all go, "No, it's not me that touched you. No. I'm just here because it's what we do. No. Don't mess with my life. I'm really comfortable just showing up 1.7 times a month. I don't mean for Christianity to impact my home. I just want to make sure I get into heaven." No, Russ, calm down a little bit. Look, $130,000. I don't know about that. No, let me ask you something. There's 33,000 people in the city of El Mirage. $130,000 down payment isn't worth touching every one of them for the kingdom. Really? Really? Are we just going to be a church that just presses in and goes with the flow? I'm the wrong guy for that. I want to be one of the guys that stands up and says, "You know what, there's a generation that's dying. And I want to be in such a relationship with you, I want to invite you to my home." You with me? See, a little earlier on, there was a guy, the centurion of the Roman soldiers, and he came to Jesus and he said, "I have a servant that's sick. Would you speak a word that he'd be healed?" And we read that and go, "Wow, that guy's great." And Jesus really does say, "Man, your faith blows me away." But you know what? I don't want Jesus to speak a word over City Church. I want him to come. But there's a difference between a sick servant and a dying daughter. There's a difference between a sick servant and a city that needs a move of God. Big difference. And really, City Church, We just want to go there and fill up chairs, fill up buckets. Nah, I'm not the guy. I don't think you're the church. But we don't start living a life that Jerry has said, I don't care what it costs me. I don't care what my prestige costs me. I don't care that I'm the president of the synagogue. I don't care. I don't care what you're going to think about me. I don't care. I know that I'm going to have Jesus come to my home and change a generation. That's what I want to pursue. That makes sense? Let's stand there. And if I preach this next week, you have a choice. You can act surprised, or you can look at other people and go, if you'd have been here, you wouldn't do this twice. Jesus, I love you, and man, I just pray that we will be a people that won't just press in. We won't just play a game. We won't be satisfied with status quo. There'll be a hunger in us for proximity with you, that we'll cry out for a generation. We will give whatever it takes to achieve having you come with us. I just make that declaration. City Church we will not just press in. When you turn and say, who touched me, we will be first in line. And we will tell our story. We will know the miracles, the blessings of the Most High God. Lord, I just thank you that we get to gather in your name today. I love you, Jesus. You're amazing. In Jesus' name, amen.